H2K Infosys provides world-class online IT training, staffing and software testing solutions to customers worldwide. H2K Infosys supports 100% job-oriented training, hands-on project work, cloud test lab, resume preparation and review, mock interviews, robust syllabus. One-time pay, lifetime access to live classes and videos. H2K Infosys has won the trust of thousands of students worldwide. For free demo class, visit h2kinfosys.com.
Hello, hi everyone. Participants, this is Priya here from H2K Infosys and we'll get started with the session. So before I start, let me introduce myself. My name is Priya and I'm a senior automation tester with more than 12 years of experience in this IT field, and I will be the faculty for your batch. This is my email address, priya@h2kinfosys.com. So in case you have any sort of issues or let's say you need any sort of assistance during the QA training, so you can always write me an email to this email address. And this is a contact number here, 770-777-1269. So if you have any sort of technical issues during the meeting, you can call this number. Now this is a software testing course that all of you have enrolled, and after the completion of this course, you'll be able to work as a software tester in the IT projects. Now before I start, a couple of instructions to all of you. All the participants will be on mute. So if you have any questions, you're going to use a chat box. And whenever we are discussing something, you have to pay attention. Once I'm done, I'll give you some time to ask your questions and then to make your notes. And Sahid, see, once the email list is ready, all of you will start receiving the materials and videos. So I've informed our H2K team to create the email list for your batch. And once it is ready, all of you will start receiving the materials and videos. So we are going to discuss the basics here, the software engineering basics, because most of the candidates who enroll in this QA course are from non-IT. And being an IT professional, you should understand how the software projects are going to work. And also, testing is not an independent activity. You'll have to interact with the other members of the IT project team. So I guess everybody understands what is the meaning of software. It is a set of programs that is developed for a specific purpose. And we have several examples of the software. Like we have this Microsoft Office, internet banking application, the shopping sites, mobile applications. So if you just look around you, you find plenty of examples of the software. And in order to develop the software in the IT industry, we have the standard steps that are to be followed. We call it as SDLC. SDLC means it is a step-by-step approach to develop the software development life cycle. It is a step-by-step approach to develop the software. We start with the requirement gathering. And then we have the planning, analysis, software design, development, testing, deployment, and then we have the user acceptance testing. So these are the different steps that are followed in order to develop the software. And no matter what kind of project it is, we follow the same 8 steps in order to develop the software. But every software is different, the requirements are different, the client is different, the technology is different, we have the different budget, and that is why we have the standard approaches here in order to develop the software, and we call this as SDLC model. And who decides which model is to be followed in the project? It is decided by the project manager. The project manager, based on the project scenario, decides which SDLC model has to be used in the project. Now there are two types here. Sequential design process. For example, we'll consider the waterfall model and then the V model here. Then we have another category that is called as iterative model or the incremental model. For example, spiral and then agile scrum. So these are the two types of the SDLC models that we have, sequential and then the iterative or the incremental methods. Now all of you please quickly go through this, make a note of it. If you have any questions in whatever we have discussed till now, please let me know on the chat box. I'll wait for 2 minutes and then I will explain to you the waterfall and V model in today's session. And Sharma, we just started with this, the definition of the software and then its examples. In the SDLC, Sahir, it's usually the development that takes more time when compared to any other steps here. Any questions, participants? Please let me know on the chat box. I'll wait for 2 minutes. All of you please go through this, make a note. So now we'll have a look at the first model, which is called as waterfall model. Now this is the waterfall model that you can see on my screen. And this is an example for the sequential design process. Means you have to follow all the steps in the same sequence that is mentioned here. So this is the sequential design process. And all the steps have to be followed in the same sequence that you can see here. It is a top-down approach. Means you start with the scope identification and then planning, analysis, design, development, testing, deployment and user acceptance testing. You have to follow the same direction. The reverse direction is not allowed here. You cannot go back to the previous steps. And that is why the name is given as waterfall model. So it means that if the client comes in the middle of the project, let's say we are in the design phase and the client is getting us the new requirements or some major changes in the requirements, they cannot be accepted. So any kind of new requirements or the changes in the requirements in the middle of the project cannot be accepted. So they get rejected here. Because again we'll have to start with the planning for the new requirements or the changes. That is why right at the start of the project we need to gather the clear and complete requirements from the client. We need to gather the clear and complete requirements from the client. And this kind of model is applicable for simple, and then low budget projects. Okay, this kind of model is applicable for simple and low budget project. Okay, so participants, this is the waterfall model. I'll give you 3 minutes. All of you please go through this, and if anybody has any questions, please write your questions on the chat box. We will take up all the questions together. Yes, any questions, please let me know on the chat box. So here are the questions that I could see from the chat box. In case if I have missed any of your questions, you should let me know on the chat box. BA interacts with the client to gather the information, but the analysis part for the specification. With whom does the BA interact? Here also the BA obviously interacts with the client and provides more details about the different features of the software. What is the example of the low budget project? The simple marketing websites that we use, okay, or a simple mobile application with one or two functionalities can be an example of the low budget project. Yes, it is still in practice, but then we cannot always say no to the client. That is why some minor changes which do not involve too much of rework can be accepted. Means in the real time, we use actually the modified version of the waterfall model, wherein few changes in the requirements which do not involve too much of rework can be accepted. Yes, this is a first session in the sense the previous one was a demo class, all right. And after the enrollment, yes, this could be the first session. So this was the waterfall model. Now the next model that we have, it's called as a V model. So this is how the V model looks like. It is in the shape of V, as you can see. So let's understand more about this V model. And all the steps of the software development lifecycle will be the same here also. We follow the same steps of the software development lifecycle. Requirement gathering, planning, specification design is same as analysis. Then we have the architecture design, module design, coding is development, and then we have the unit integration testing, system testing, and then we release the software to the client and they will do the acceptance testing. So do you see all the steps of the software development lifecycle are followed here in the same sequence, okay? And the documents that are created here on the verification side, these are used as test basis. Or the reference here on the validation. And this also is a sequential design process. During the requirements gathering, we have the business requirement document. Then we have the specification design, means the functional specification document. During the design phase, it is the design document. And then we have the coding or the programming. Unit and integration testing, we refer back to the design document. For the system testing, we refer back to the FSD. Acceptance testing, we refer back to the business requirement document. So what is BRD? BRD means it is business requirement document. When the business analyst will meet the client, gather the project requirements, it is documented here in the business requirement document. And then we have the function specification document. I think somebody is clicking on the mute and unmute button. Please don't click on that. There will be audio disturbances. So FSD means it is a functional specification document wherein each and every requirement is explained here in detail. Using the mockup diagrams. So you can go through this, participants. This is how the V model works. What is verification? What is validation? And also all these different levels of testing. I'm going to explain in detail. All of you please go through this much. I'll wait for 3 minutes so you can go through this. Now let me check the questions here from the chat box. So all the testing will be done by the QA. I will tell you what are the different types of testing that you have to do as a QA. So for every testing, integration, system testing, we will refer to the specific document. Yes, obviously. So in this model, planning is not included. It is there. It's just not represented here. It doesn't mean that we don't do planning. We have also not mentioned regarding the deployment here. So does that mean that we are not going to deploy the software to the client? It's just that it's not represented, but yes, planning is there, deployment is there. All the steps of the SDLC will be followed here. Okay. Now I'll explain to you all these different levels of testing. Now, participants, can you tell me who writes the programs in the real-time projects? Who writes the programs here in the real-time projects? Programs are written by the developers. We have the development team here, okay, with the developers who write the programs, okay. So after the programs are written, can we release these individual program files to the client directly? Can we release these individual program files to the client directly? We cannot. They should get integrated into the software. Okay, all the programs should get integrated into the software. Now, in case if any program has an error and if we integrate such program here in the software, can you tell me what happens? If we are integrating a defective program into the software, what happens? Yes, what happens, participants, if we integrate a defective program into the software? So if we are integrating the defective program components into the software, it can affect the other programs as well, and it can also create the defect in the software. Okay. That is why before we integrate these program files, each and every program has to be tested. We call it as unit or the component testing. So here we test each program independently before we integrate into the software. Then we have the integration testing. So here we test the interfaces between the programs, means all the programs have got interfaced properly or interlinked properly or not, we check and we call it as integration testing. Then we release the software to the QA team. Then the system testing is done by the QA here. The QA team does the system testing. What about the integration and unit testing? These are done by the developers because it is the program level testing that has to be done here. The programs and then their interfaces have to be tested, and QA is not from the programming background. That is why this kind of testing will be done by the developers. And then we release a software to the client. From the client side, The user acceptance testing will be done by the real users. If the users are testing in the IT environment, we call it as alpha testing. If the testing is done in the real environment, we call it as a beta testing. The first two types wherein the programs are written by the developers here. We call it as a white box testing. If we are not testing the actual software, sorry, if we are not getting into the programming aspects and we are getting into the actual software testing, we call it as black box testing. So these are the different levels of the software testing that have to be done in the dynamic testing. So this is coming under the dynamic testing. Okay. Now all of you please go through this. I'll give you 5 minutes. If you have any questions, please let me know on the chat box. Any questions, participants? Please let me know on the chat box. Now let me check the questions here from the chat box. Can you give more information about the white box and black box? Yes, I can. So here I will show you an example. All of you please look at my screen. Let's consider the wellsfargo.com. This is an internet banking application of the Wells Fargo Bank, wherein you can see a lot of functionalities, and then you have to test this kind of software. Click on the search, enter some search keyword and check whether the information is getting displayed. Then you have the login functionality. Enter the different combinations of the data and check the different steps here. All right. So this is the black box testing because you cannot see the programs that are written by the developer here on the screen. Now I go to the view here, then we have the developer view source code. So do you see there is some kind of code or the program that is associated with this Wells Fargo? And testing this kind of programs, we call it as a white box testing. During the white box testing, the programs are getting displayed on the screen of the developers because they have the development tools installed on their computer. Yes, together it is called as a dynamic testing because we execute the software while we do the white box and then the black box testing. Okay, the same question here. Um, you don't have to do it, Sharma. It is done by the developers so they can view this kind of programs on their screen which they are going to test. What is the difference between the IT environment and the real environment? Now let's consider an example of the ATM. So after the software is developed, the users can visit our IT company and we can set up the systems for them. They do the testing of their ATM software before it is installed on the real ATMs. Or testing can be done on the real ATM machines itself, and we call this as a beta testing. So this is a real environment wherein the software is supposed to work. And the IT environment means the testing is done here in the IT company. Okay. So these are the two types of the user acceptance testing. Now we have this verification and validation. What is verification? It is the quality control process. Validation is quality assurance. So quality control means it is testing plus error correction. Quality assurance means it is testing plus the defect reporting. For example, now let's say the developers are writing the programs. While they write the programs, they will also run the programs. They will check the errors and then they will fix up the errors parallelly. So do you see? While they are writing the programs, they are also checking the errors and then fixing them up. Means while doing testing, they are also fixing the errors. And testing plus defect reporting, for example, let's say we have the system testing that is done by the QA here. So as a QA, you have to test the software and report the defects to the developers. You're not supposed to fix any defects, but then you just have to report the defects to the developers. All right. So this is the difference between the verification and validation. So you can go through this, participants. Please let me know if you have any questions. To give you the recap of today's class, participants, we have discussed the meaning of software, the different steps of the software development, and then the waterfall and V model. Okay, so this is what we had to discuss in today's session. In the next session, we are going to discuss the iterative and then incremental models. For example, the spiral and agile scrum. All right. And I will check if your email list is ready. Once the email list is ready, you will start receiving the materials and videos. Okay. All right then. So participants, this is what we had to discuss in today's class. We will close the session and then we will meet in the next session. Okay. All right then. Thanks everyone and have a good day.